In Defense of Women by H. L. Mencken, Section 9, Woman Suffrage, Part 3. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. 38. Pathological Effects. This feminine craving for martyrdom, of course, often takes on a downright pathological character, and so engages a psychiatrist. Women show many other traits of the same sort. To be a woman under our Christian civilization, indeed, means to live a life that is heavy with repression and dissimulation. And this repression and dissimulation, in the long run, cannot fail to produce effects that are indistinguishable from disease. You will find some of them described at length in any handbook on psychoanalysis. The Viennese, Adler, and the Dane, Paul Bjerre, argue indeed that womanliness itself, as it is encountered under Christianity, is a disease. All women suffer from a suppressed revolt against the inhibitions forced upon them by our artificial culture, and this suppressed revolt, by well-known Freudian means, produces a complex of mental symptoms that is familiar to all of us. At one end of the scale we observe the suffragette with her grotesque adoption of the male belief in laws, phrases, and talismans, and her hysterical demand for a sexual libertarianism that she could not put to use if she had it. And at the other end we find the snuffling and neurotic woman, with her bogus martyrdom, her extravagant pruderies, and her pathological delusions. As Ibsen observed long ago, this is a man's world. Women have broken many of their old chains, but they are still enmeshed in a formidable network of man-made taboos and sentimentalities, and it will take them another generation, at least, to get genuine freedom. That this is true is shown by the deep unrest that yet marks the sex, despite its recent progress towards social, political, and economic equality. It is almost impossible to find a man who honestly wishes that he were a woman, but almost every woman, at some time or other in her life, is gnawed by a regret that she is not a man. Two of the hardest things that women have to bear are A, the stupid masculine disinclination to admit their intellectual superiority, or even their equality, or even their possession of a normal human equipment for thought, and B, the equally stupid and masculine doctrine that they constitute a special and ineffable species of vertebrata, without the natural instincts and appetites of the order. To adapt the phrase from Haeckel, that they are transcendental and almost gaseous mammals, and marked by a complete lack of certain salient mammalian characters. The first imbecility has already concerned us at length. One finds traces of it even in the works professedly devoted to disposing of it. In one such book, for example, I come upon this, quote, "What all the skill and constructive capacity of the physicians in the Crimean War failed to accomplish, Florence Nightingale accomplished by her beautiful femininity and nobility of soul." End quote. In other words, by her possession of some recondite and indescribable magic, sharply separated from the ordinary mental processes of man. The theory is unsound and preposterous. Miss Nightingale accomplished her useful work not by magic, but by hard common sense. The problem before her was simply one of organization. Many men had tackled it, and all of them had failed stupendously. What she did was to bring her feminine sharpness of wit, her feminine clear thinking, to bear upon it. Thus attacked, it yielded quickly, and once it had been brought to order, it was easy for other persons to carry on what she had begun. But the opinion of a man's world still prefers to credit her success to some mysterious angelical quality, unstatable in lucid terms, and having no more reality than the divine inspiration of an archbishop. Her extraordinarily acute and accurate intelligence is thus conveniently put upon the table, and the amour propre of man is kept inviolate. To confess frankly that she had more sense than any male Englishman of her generation would be to utter a truth too harsh to be bearable. The second delusion commonly shows itself in the theory, already discussed, that women are devoid of any sex instinct, that they submit to the odious caresses of the lubricious male only by a powerful effort of will, and with the sole object of discharging their duty to posterity. It would be impossible to go into this delusion with proper candor and at due length in a work designed for reading aloud in the domestic circle. All I can do is refer the student to books of any competent authority on the psychology of sex, say Ellis, or to the confidences, if they are obtainable, of any complacent bachelor of his acquaintance. 39. Women as Christians. The glad tidings preached by Christ were obviously highly favorable to women. He lifted them to equality before the Lord when their very possession of souls was still doubted by the majority of rival theologians. Moreover, he esteemed them socially and set value upon their sagacity, and one of the most disdained of their sex, a lady formerly in public life, was among his regular advisers. Mariolatry is thus by no means the invention of the medieval popes, as Protestant theologians would have us believe. On the contrary, it is plainly discernible in the four Gospels. What the medieval popes actually invented, or to be precise, reinvented, for they simply borrowed the elements of it from St. Paul, was the doctrine of women's inferiority, the precise opposite of the thing credited to them. Committed, for sound reasons of discipline, to the celibacy of the clergy, they had to support it by depicting all traffic with women in the light of a hazardous and ignominious business. The result was the deliberate organization and development of the theory of female triviality, lack of responsibility, and general looseness of mind. Woman became a sort of devil, but without the admired intelligence of the regular demons. The appearance of women saints, however, offered a constant and embarrassing criticism of this idiotic doctrine. If occasional women were fit to sit upon the right hand of God, and they were often proving it and forcing the church to acknowledge it, then surely all women could not be as bad as the books made them out. There thus arose the concept of the angelic women, the natural Vestal. We see her at full length in the romances of medieval chivalry. What emerged in the end was a sort of double doctrine: first, that women were devils, and secondly, that they were angels. This preposterous dualism has merged, as we have seen, into a compromised dogma in modern times. By that dogma it is held on the one hand that women are unintelligent and immoral, and on the other hand that they are free from all those weaknesses of the flesh which distinguish men. Thus, roughly speaking, is the notion of the average male numbskull today. Christianity has thus both libeled women and flattered them, but with the weight always on the side of the libel. It is therefore, at bottom, their enemy, as the religion of Christ, now wholly extinct, was their friend. And as they gradually throw off the shackles that have bound them for 1,000 years, they show appreciation of the fact. Women, indeed, are not naturally religious, and they are growing less and less religious as year chases year. Their ordinary devotion has little, if any, pious exaltation in it. It is a routine practice forced on them by the masculine notion that an appearance of holiness is proper to their lowly station, and a masculine feeling that church-going somehow keeps them in order and out of doings that would be less reassuring. When they exhibit any genuine religious fervor, its sexual character is usually so obvious that even the majority of men are cognizant of it. Women never go flocking ecstatically to a church in which the agent of God in the pulpit is an elderly asthmatic with a watchful wife. When one finds them driven to frenzies by the merits of the saints, and weeping over the sorrows of the heathen, and rushing out to haul the whole vicinage up to grace, and spending hours on their knees in hysterical abasement before the heavenly throne, it is quite safe to assume, even without an actual visit, that the ecclesiastic who has worked the miracle is a fair and toothsome fellow, and a good deal more aphrodisiacal than learned. All the great preachers to women in modern times have been men of suave and ingratiating habit, and the great majority of them, from Henry Ward Beecher up and down, have been taken, soon or late, in transactions far more suitable to the boudoir than to the footstool of the Almighty. Their famous killings have always been made among the silliest sort of women, the sort, in brief, who fall so short of the normal acumen of their sex that they are bemused by mere beauty in men. Such women are in the minority, and so the sex shows a good deal fewer religious enthusiasts per mill than the sex of sentiment and belief. Attending several years ago the gladiatorial shows of the Reverend Dr. Billy Sunday, the celebrated American pulpit clown, I was constantly struck by the great preponderance of males in the pen devoted to the saved. Men of all ages and in enormous numbers came swarming to the altar, loudly bawling for help against their sins, but the women were anything but numerous, and the few who appeared were chiefly either chlorotic adolescents or pathetic old South Western. For 6 nights running I sat directly beneath the gifted exhorter without seeing a single female convert of what statisticians call the childbearing age, that is, the age of maximum intelligence and charm. Among the male simpletons bagged by his yells during this time were the president of a railroad, half a dozen rich bankers and merchants, and the former governor of an American state. But not a woman of comparable position or dignity, not a woman that any self-respecting bachelor would care to chuck under the chin. This cynical view of religious emotionalism, and with it of the whole stock of ecclesiastical balderdash, is probably responsible, at least in part, for the reluctance of women to enter upon the sacerdotal career. In those Christian sects which still bar them from the pulpit, usually on the imperfectly concealed ground that they are not equal to its alleged demands upon the morals and the intellect, one never hears of them protesting against the prohibition. They are quite content to leave the degrading imposture to men, who are better fitted for it by talent and conscience. And in those Baroque sects, chiefly American, which admit them, they show no eagerness to put on the stole and chasuble. When the first clergywoman appeared in the United States, it was predicted by alarmists that men would be driven out of the pulpit by the new competition. Nothing of the sort has occurred, nor is it in prospect. The whole corps of female divines in the country might be herded into one small room. Women, when literate at all, are far too intelligent to make effective ecclesiastics. Their sharp sense of reality is in endless opposition to the whole sacerdotal masquerade, and their cynical humor stands against the snorting that is inseparable from pulpit oratory. Those women who enter upon the religious life are almost invariably moved by some motive distinct from mere pious inflammation. It is a commonplace, indeed, that in Catholic countries girls are driven into convents by economic considerations, or by disasters of amour, far oftener than they are drawn there by the hope of heaven. Read the lives of the female saints, and you will see how many of them tried marriage and failed at it before they ever turned to religion. In Protestant lands, very few women adopt it as a profession at all, and among the few a secular impulse is almost always visible. The girl who is suddenly overcome by a desire to minister to the heathen in foreign lands is nearly invariably found on inspection to be a girl harboring a theory that it would be agreeable to marry some heroic missionary. In point of fact, she duly marries him. At home, perhaps, she has found it impossible to get a husband, but in the remoter marches of China, Senegal, and Somaliland, with no white competition present, it is equally impossible to fail. 40. Piety as a social habit. What remains of the alleged piety of women is little more than a social habit, reinforced in most communities by a paucity of other and more inviting divertissements. If you have ever observed the women of Spain and Italy at their devotions, you need not be told how much the worship of God may be a mere excuse for relaxation and gossip. These women, in their daily lives, are surrounded by a formidable network of medieval taboos. Their normal human desire for ease and freedom in intercourse is opposed by masculine distrust and superstition. They meet no strangers, they see and hear nothing new. In the house of the Most High, they escape from that vexing routine. Here they may brush shoulders with a crowd. Here, so to speak, they may crane their mental necks and stretch their spiritual legs. Here, above all, they may come into some sort of contact with men relatively more affable, cultured, and charming than their husbands and fathers, to wit, with the reverend clergy. Elsewhere in Christendom, though women are not quite so relentlessly watched and penned up, they feel much the same need of variety and excitement, and both are likewise on tap in the temples of the Lord. No one, I am sure, need be told that the average missionary society or church sewing circle is not primary religious organization. Its actual purpose is precisely that of the absurd clubs and secret orders to which the lower and least resourceful classes of men belong. It offers a mean of refreshment, of self-expression, of personal display, of political manipulation and boasting, and, if the pastor happens to be interesting, of discreet and almost lawful intrigue. In the course of a life largely devoted to the study of pietistic phenomena, I have never met a single woman who cared an authentic damn for the actual heathen. The attraction in their salvation is almost purely social. Women go to church for the same reason that farmers and convicts go to church. Finally, there is the aesthetic lure. Religion, in most parts of Christendom, holds out the only bait of beauty that the inhabitants are ever cognizant of. It offers music, dim lights, relatively ambitious architecture, eloquence, formality, and mystery, the caressing meaninglessness that is at the heart of poetry. Women are far more responsive to such things than men, who are ordinarily quite as devoid of aesthetic sensitiveness as so many oxen. The attitude of the typical man toward beauty in its various forms is, in fact, an attitude of suspicion and hostility. He does not regard a work of art as merely inert and stupid. He regards it as, in some indefinable way, positively offensive. He sees the artist as a professional voluptuary and scoundrel, and would no more trust him in his household than he would trust a colored clergyman in his hen-yard. It was men and not women who invented such sordid and literal faiths as those of the Mennonites, Dunkards, Wesleyans, and Scotch Presbyterians, with their antipathy to beautiful ritual, their obscene buttonholing of God, their great talent for reducing the ineffable mystery of religion to a mere bawling of idiots. The normal woman, in so far as she has any religion at all, moves irresistibly towards Catholicism with its poetical obscurantism. The evangelical Protestant sects have a hard time holding her. She can no more be an actual Methodist than a gentleman can be a Methodist. This inclination towards beauty, of course, is dismissed by the average male blockhead as no more than a feeble sentimentality. The truth is that it is precisely the opposite. It is surely not sentimentality to be moved by the stately and mysterious ceremony of the Mass, or even, say, by those timid imitations of it which one observes in certain Protestant churches. Such proceedings, whatever their defects from the standpoint of a pure aesthetic, are at all events vastly more beautiful than any of the private acts of the folk who take part in them. They lift themselves above the barren utilitarianism of everyday life, and no less above the maudlin sentimentalities that men seek pleasure in. They offer a means of escape, convenient and inviting, from the sordid routine of thought and occupation which women revolt against so pertinaciously. 41. The ethics of women. I have said that the religion preached by Jesus, now wholly extinct in the world, was highly favorable to women. This was not saying, of course, that women have repaid the compliment by adopting it. They are, in fact, indifferent Christians in the primitive sense, just as they are bad Christians in the antagonistic modern sense, and particularly on the side of ethics. If they actually accept the renunciations commanded by the Sermon on the Mount, it is only in an effort to flout their substance under cover of their appearance. No woman is really humble. She is merely politic. No woman, with a free choice before her, chooses self-immolation. The most she genuinely desires in that direction is a spectacular martyrdom. No woman delights in poverty. No woman yields when she can prevail. No woman is honestly meek. In their practical ethics, indeed, women pay little heed to the precepts of the founders of Christianity, and the fact has passed into proverb. Their gentleness, like the so-called honor of men, is visible only in situations which offer them no menace. The moment a woman finds herself confronted by an antagonistic, genuinely dangerous, either to her own security or to the well-being of those under her protection, say a child or husband, she displays a bellicosity which stops at nothing, however outrageous. In the courts of law, one occasionally encounters a male extremist who tells the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth, even when it is against his cause, but no such woman has ever been on view since the days of Justinian. It is, indeed, an axiom of the bar that women invariably lie upon the stand, and the whole effort of a barrister who has one for a client is devoted to keeping her within bounds, that the obtuse suspicions of the male jury may not be unduly aroused. Women litigants almost always win their cases, not, as is commonly assumed, because jurymen fall in love with them, but simply and solely because they are clear-headed, resourceful, implacable, and without qualms. What is here visible in the halls of justice, in the face of a vast technical equipment for combating mendacity, is 10 times more obvious in the freer fields. Any man who is so unfortunate as to have serious controversy with a woman, say in the departments of finance, theology, or more, must inevitably carry away from it a sense of having passed through a dangerous and almost gruesome experience. Women not only bite in the clinches, they bite even in open fighting. They have a dental reach, so to speak, of amazing length. No attack is so desperate that they will not undertake it once they are aroused. No device is so unfair and horrifying that it stays them. In my early days, desiring to improve my prose, I served for a year or so as a reporter for a newspaper in a police court, and during that time I heard perhaps 400 cases of so-called wife-beating. The husbands, in their defense, almost invariably pleaded justification, and some of them told such tales of studied atrocity at the domestic hearth, both psychic and physical, that the learned magistrate discharged them with tears in his eyes, and the very catchpoles in the courtroom had to blow their noses. Many more men than women go insane, and many more married men than single men. The fact puzzles no one who has had the same opportunity that I had to find out what goes on year in and year out behind the doors of apparently happy homes. A woman, if she hates her husband, and many of them do, can make life so sour and obnoxious to him that even death upon the gallows seems sweet by comparison. This hatred, of course, is often and perhaps almost invariably quite justified. To be the wife of an ordinary man, indeed, is an experience that must be very hard to bear. The hollowness and vanity of the fellow, his petty meanness and stupidity, his puling sentimentality and credulity, his bombastic air of a cock on a dunghill, his anesthesia to all whispers and summonings of the spirit, above all, his loathsome comeliness in amour, all these things must revolt any woman above the lowest. To be the object of ophis affections of such a creature, even when they are honest and profound, cannot be expected to give any genuine joy to a woman of sense and refinement. His performance as a gallant, as Honore de Balzac long ago observed, unescapably suggests a guerrilla's efforts to play the violin. Women survive the tragicomedy only by dint of their great capacity for play acting. They are able to act so realistically that often they deceive even themselves. The average woman's contentment, indeed, is no more than a tribute to her histrionism. But there must be innumerable revolts in secret even so, and one sometimes wonders that so few women, with the thing so facile and so safe, poison their husbands. Perhaps it's not quite as rare as vital statistics make it out. The death rate among husbands is very much higher than among wives. More than once, indeed, I have gone to the funeral of an acquaintance who died suddenly, and observed a curious glitter in the eyes of the inconsolable widow. Even in this age of emancipation, normal women have few serious transactions in life save with their husbands and potential husbands. The business of marriage is their dominant concern from adolescence to senility. When they step outside the habitual circle, they show the same alert and eager wariness that they exhibit within it. A man who has dealings with them must keep his wits about him, and even when he is most cautious, he is often flabbergasted by their sudden and unconscionable forays. Whenever a woman goes into a trade, she quickly gets a reputation as a sharp trader. Every little town in America has its heady green, each sweating blood from turnips, each the terror of all the manufacturers of the neighborhood. The man who tackles such an Amazon of barter takes his fortune into his hands. He has little more chance of success against the feminine technique in business than he has against the feminine technique in marriage. In both arenas, the advantage of women lies in their freedom from sentimentality. In business, they address themselves wholly to their own profit, and give no thought whatever to the hopes, aspirations, and amour propre of their antagonists. And in the duel of sex they fence, not to make points, but to disable and disarm. A man, when he succeeds in throwing off a woman who has attempted to marry him, always carries away a maudlin sympathy for her in her defeat and dismay. But no one ever heard of a woman who pitied the poor fellow whose honest passion she had found it expedient to spurn. On the contrary, women take delight in such clownish agonies, and exhibit them proudly, and boast about them to other women. End of section 9. Woman Suffrage, Part 3.